This is ThriveCasters,
Thriving, not surviving.
tackling youth issues that matter to you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to ThriveCasters. Today we're talking about youth violence. I'm Waseelah, and with me I have Hannah. Hi Hannah.
Hi guys, hi Waseelah.
So, do you ever think about youth violence? Because I never really think about it up until we started having these conversations.
I definitely never really ever thought about it, and even through having these conversations, I think because it's not up there in the thing, I tend to think about certain things a lot and what that take priority, and it's just never really been a priority to me. I don't know whether it's because of the area I've grown up in. I guess Bourneville of Birmingham's quite a nice area, but then directly outside of Bourneville, you've got areas where there is more violence and stuff. So I think it seems a lot of the time, it really depends on your the environment you're in alongside other things. What about your environment or your place where you live? How much have you kind of experienced it?
I know it's strange because I grew up not really ever thinking about youth violence, but also knowing that I shouldn't go out when it's dark. And there are certain areas and certain places that I know as a young woman are more dangerous than others.
Yeah.
So, I'm not comfortable walking back when it's dark. So I will always call my dad, or I drive home, or I take the bus or call an Uber or something, because I know going back by myself a lot along these side roads and things isn't the safest place.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of similar for me in the sense that I would, but I probably wasn't as careful as I should have been. And now at the age of 24, I'm probably a bit more careful than I was when I was a teenager. Probably because I was a little rebellious side of me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess at the same time, I always knew that being out when it was dark, even though I still did it, I knew that it wasn't necessarily the safest thing to do, and people around me weren't going out when it was dark and stuff. And I did have a few incidences where maybe I would feel nervous walking past a gang at night, or I would be followed. I've been followed a couple of times. I remember you saying that that's happened to you as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that was kind of stuff when you leave home. So when I went to uni, and then all of a sudden I'm by myself, and then university campuses tend to be quite safe, or at least mine was. It's up on a big hill in the middle of nowhere. But then you do have these moments where even people that they end up being the people that are hurting you. People that who end up doing things and making you feel uncomfortable, or on the occasions when you're followed off the train, and it's and these kinds of things that when the safety of your own home you don't really notice. You've just that's the type of thing that happens on TV, right? It's not normal. But I think youth violence, I think only now, very recently, has as they say, the knife crime epidemic. Only now has that sort of come into where I live, where there have been sort of more shootings and more stabbings within places that I know of. Usually it's just this, far away news story, and it's really tragic, but it's not local. And I think that's changed. But then I didn't ever go outside into those places, into those communities of people who were involved in that kind of thing ever before. But then we realized that it's so much closer than we realized.
Yeah, I think it tends to be like that. Definitely in England. I mean, because there's not as much countryside and stuff. Especially in the Midlands. It tends to be nice area there, then shortly after rough area, nice area, rough area.
Yeah.
So if you don't ever venture out into the areas that people consider to be rougher, then you probably just wouldn't know. But I guess it depends how much you do travel around.
Yeah.
But I wonder at the moment, with coronavirus, I wonder how much youth violence is going on as we speak, or whether
Well,
like
that's what was really strange. Like you'd think with everybody staying inside, it would be different. But a few days ago, I read that there was a shooting near me,
mm,
which, it's very rare as it is. And I imagine, and I think youth violence, it's a big term and it has a lot of things in it. So, like domestic violence, for example, and violence against women, violence against men has increased. Like all of these, like women's helps groups, there's like doubled and tripled in terms of the numbers of phone calls that they're getting because people can't go outside for that relief.
yeah,
And I think like all of the tension that young people have, like they're in the same boat. They might not necessarily have home as a safe space, but they have no choice to be there, or all of these different factors, and everybody's lives are different, and everybody has their own traumas and their own situation. And
mm,
so therefore youth violence, you know it's different because people obviously aren't going outside and socializing in the same way, but it's still there, it's just changed.
yeah. That's a really good point. That like obviously I know there was the shooting and stuff, and maybe like certain crimes like robbery, etc.
Yeah,
Like
they've gone up like loads of that has been happening, especially because people are vulnerable and they know where things are, and the
yeah,
police are distracted, and the police aren't even going to go into houses to check or anything like that.
yeah. So it, I feel like coronavirus is probably quite a good um way of explaining youth crime in certain ways, and that maybe people like maybe people do commit these crimes as kind of a release, or as like built up energy or out of frustration and stuff like that. And it might be happening more because people don't have the same release because they can't go outside, and everyone's routines are um like different. But I think that's
Yeah,
definitely at the moment, I think that's definitely, like I've seen on Instagram and stuff like that, people posting awareness and stuff of people, that the fact that domestic violence has gone up so much at the moment. And I think just a lot of awareness and protection should be happening at the moment for
yeah,
especially people who feel like they're not safe in their own homes, because that's something that
mm.
I I've never had with regards to like physical harm. Like I would feel safe in my, like obviously there was a few mental health problems in my household, but I'd never would have feared for my physical safety whatsoever.
Yeah,
And I can't even begin to imagine how awful that must be. Um,
yeah,
but I can imagine as well that when you do go through that, probably physical harm or violence, then it just becomes desensitized to you,
yeah.
um, and so you end up like it's not, you won't think it's as bad if you've grown up with it than if you don't grow up with it. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I think that's like the important thing, and the reason why we were doing this podcast is because people aren't aware of experiences of trauma, and even things that are really, really common, like divorce, or separations, or mental health issues, anxiety, depression. Like these things do cause traumas, and they are parts of the adverse childhood experiences that we want to talk about in the rest of this series. Is the fact that especially in Corona, like the release that people used to have, the therapy or playing sports, joining youth clubs, going to school, like
Mm.
all of these outlets where people would heal from things have been taken away.
Yeah.
But people themselves, like we are not aware of how these things affect us,
Mm.
and even in ourselves. So when we're at home, and I think this is something that Corona has highlighted, and something that going forward we should all be more aware of, is trauma and how it affects us and the ways that it looks and just how nuanced it can be.
Mm.
And breaking through that narrative, like everybody's sort of, especially the media, they have this thing which is like, oh, it's people in poverty who suffer from this, people in poverty go through this type of stuff, and domestic violence and everything. But like domestic violence is found all over society, trauma is found throughout society, it just looks different for various different reasons, and we should be really, really aware of that. And Corona's highlighted that everybody has these issues. Everybody is aware or is involved with something that, causes you to, be violent in different ways, either violent to yourself, violent to other people.
Yeah, I think as well, like as well as trauma being really important, I think the government's emphasis on the importance of the economy is, I think that really plays into violence as well, because there's so much of focus on the health of the economy and that being the most important thing, especially even through the coronavirus. There'll be some people out there, or even some members of the government, that will be more concerned with the health of the economy rather than the health of the people.
Yeah, but this is what's happening in America, and this is the thing that people need to understand about America. And Donald Trump had this thing where he was saying, the economy crashing would be so much worse than people dying of corona. It's like, but is it?
Yeah.
And it's about where your priorities lie.
Yeah, I think as well, like it would be interesting to look at how many cases of crime, youth crime, knife violence have been about money, or have money has played a part in it. Um, I think that would be a good shift to happen. Like, obviously, it's a very complex thing to discuss, and like there's a lot to it. But if there was somehow a shift on from the focus of money onto the focus of general well-being or healing,
Yeah.
if general well-being or healing was actually more important than money, I think that there would be a lot less knife crime. But obviously that's not
But
the
also
way.
understanding that these things are cyclical. So, like, if you've grown up in an environment that is filled with trauma,
Yeah.
it's more likely that you're going to have health issues. It's more likely that you're not going to be succeeding at school. You're not going to be able to hold down a job, and then you end up in poverty again, and it goes round and round in circles. And I think that's a big thing that we want to talk about in this podcast, isn't it? That trauma-informed environments. What does that look like? How do we educate people and educate ourselves as young people on how to deal with these things, how to break the cycle?
So we'll post online a video of how ACEs can can affect your later life. But I think that video, the educational video on ACEs, should be shown in like all schools, should be shown in workplaces. Like there should be so much education about it that it becomes annoying, I think.
Yeah.
Just as much as, so advertising, like business or whatever, I think stuff about trauma and well-being should be like should be advertised just as much
Yeah.
as well. Like, I don't know how many people out there would agree with me, but one of the biggest things that I think that would help everything in terms of violence and stuff is upping the amount of therapy available.
Yeah.
I think that is, if we want any kind of hope of reducing crime rates and helping people helping ex-offenders, or helping people who have been a victim of crime, therapy is like one of the biggest things that will help. And I just would hope that that's what will happen, or maybe we can be a part of that happening.
Yeah. But it's that information on every level. So when you go to school, schools are aware of the different ways that trauma appears, or parents are aware of the things that they can do that affect their children, and things that children can do that affects them. Or even when you're talking about offenders, is the law, is it informed and aware of how trauma makes people make decisions? And then when you're actually in prison, are they aware, and like, are they giving the right kind of provision and the right awareness to the people in prison, like, no matter what age, to try and to give people therapy, to get people to break the cycle?
Yeah, because even like you said, like even when people do go to prison, I think everybody's aware of how much violence happens within prisons. Like you said, the most important thing here is to break the cycle. Prisons, in my opinion, isn't breaking the cycle whatsoever. It's just holding loads of people in the same place. Like, unless they're getting vigorous therapy and a lot of work on their mindset and why they're committing these crimes, what is really going to stop it from happening when they come out? I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of how prisoners are treated in terms of whether they do get therapy, but I think that would be just them providing therapy and work on themselves whilst they're in there is just as important as them being in there, in my opinion, because otherwise what's the point of going away for 18 months to come back out to do the exact same thing again?
Exactly. Like, it seems to not address the causes, and with youth violence or any kind of violence, it's about understanding the causes. And as we've noticed in the little bit of research that we've done, adverse childhood experiences, they increase your likelihood of being in prison, of developing issues, of not succeeding at school, all of these things. It increases it so much more, and it makes everything really, really unfair when it's not targeted, it's not addressed. So you can be that person that isn't another statistic or another failure, another issue, if you have the right support.
Yeah, like, I think support is the number one word with regards to youth violence that will help break the cycle. Again, going back to like going to prison, when youths do go to prison or detention centres, so if they aren't going in for like life, like obviously murder, etc., is another story. But if they're having a short trip or a short stay in prison, for example, 18 months, then it would actually, like, as much as that is a sentence of you being in prison, I think that should be just as much as having a sentence of rehabilitation, completely, like, similarly to going to rehab, like getting a lot of treatment, because nobody commits a crime for no reason. Nobody does it there's a reason behind everything, and that's the same for treatment of psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever. A lot of it, trauma is behind almost all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the conversation that I was having a few days ago is, things like the Joker. The whole thing is about how trauma, makes the Joker. But then at the same time, when you're looking at the whole Marvel thing, Batman has trauma, but he didn't become a Joker.
Yeah.
It manifests differently, it looks different, everybody's trauma is different, but we all should be aware that it touches all of us, and everybody needs support at one point in their lives in one way or another.
That's a really, really great example, actually. Have you seen the Joker, the film of?
I actually haven't seen it yet. Like, I didn't go to the cinema for a while, and I just missed all of this.
I actually watched that for the first time the other day, and it is brilliant.
Is it really, really good? Is it like as good as The Dark Knight?
I personally enjoyed it more, but then I like the whole serious psychological drama kind of vibe. Like, that's
right.
But if I give, obviously I won't spoil it for you, but if I give like a quick overview for the purpose of the podcast, it's a really good example. So there's a lot of emphasis on the Joker's childhood trauma, and obviously we all know what he ends up becoming, and ends up becoming a psychopath and killing people and stuff like that. But it shows as well how people block out their trauma that they have, and almost to the extent that they don't remember it, and then they go on to commit crimes and stuff. But the Joker is literally a perfect example that the trauma that you go through as a child, or if anyone has gone through that trauma as a child, I mean, obviously you'd have to look into the psychological theory of how that then leads to crime, because it's very complex. But it's not surprising that you would end up then committing crime, because it's never known. And I guess it's like for anyone. So say, for example, if you've grown up with a certain aspect of your life that's quite prominent, so say, imagine if, like, what's another example? You'd grown up with sitting around the table every single day to eat dinner.
Hmm.
What are the chances that you'll then, say, if you have your own family yourself, that you're going to then do
Yeah,
that same thing?
yeah,
So it's a lot of like copying.
yeah. That's really interesting looking at it like that. Almost like it's a habit.
Yeah, anyone out there that hasn't seen the Joker, if you're interested in on about, like, if you're interested in trauma and violence, like, the link between them is 100% worth a watch.
I have to watch it. I'm
Yeah.
just never into like psychological thrillers. That I'm into all of that like weird rom-com period drama stuff. They don't do a lot of psychological thrillers in those.
There might be some trauma in those
Yeah, no, there's definitely trauma, but in like a really romanticized Jane Austen kind of way. And it's just backwards, and then like the resolution to it. Well, I guess the resolution in a long, like in a far away view of it would be, a lot of the ways to heal from trauma is to be around people who love you and to be loved and to have the proper therapy and stuff. So in a Jane Austen kind of way, that happens at the end of the story.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what then is that actually an interest? That's an interesting point. I know obviously the population has increased since like 100 years ago, and I know it's increased,
Hmm.
but I wonder how much, if you go by, not obviously not the population, I wonder by person how much violence has gone up, not because of the population, just,
Well,
you know.
then, yeah, it was like violence. I'd say this as like a historian. It's like violence has changed. The way that we commit violence now, because we have different systems, we have different courts, different prisons and everything. The way that we commit violence now looks very different. So like 200, 300 years ago, you've got all of these wars, but war, war is very common, but it's a short battle and people die. So it's very common to know somebody who's died, to have, to lose someone in your family, which is also considered to be a trauma in modern psychology.
Mm.
But like it's really normal. Or even, when we're talking like, in Corona time, you've also got like the Spanish flu, and then before that you've got plagues, mass cholera outbreaks and things. During the plague, a third of the global population died. Like
Mm.
a third. That is more than we can possibly imagine. Like right now, we're really, really worried about Corona. I can't imagine what it was like living through periods of the plague.
Yeah. As well, I wonder now, like, if the plague came about again or something as serious as that, I wonder whether now, because there's more technologies, more advancements
Yeah.
in healthcare, I wonder whether we would then.
Well, that's what was interesting about the Spanish flu. When the Spanish flu came, and this is in like the 1910s, can't quite remember the exact date, but they didn't have the technology. They don't have ventilators and things like that. You don't have an ICU in the 1910s. It's World War One. This is happening at the same time. So, we wonder, and we should be so grateful for it. It's like, what would
Mm.
Corona look like, 100 years ago? It would probably look very similar to the Spanish flu.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with my friend the other day. It's a bit like depressing, but it was like, is brutality just a natural part of nature, of living? Is brutality, does it just seem to be
Mm. Yeah,
like a
exactly.
natural?
But I think that it's very normal. Like I think that when we talk about being modern and we're not as violent and things anymore, like our violence just looks different. We don't have wars here, but we have wars abroad.
Mm.
We have nuclear war. Like the amount of people that are still suffering in modern style violence is it's huge. But
Yeah.
yeah, we don't look at it like that. So
Yeah.
again, it's this awareness.
Yeah, I think that's a good point for listeners to think about after this as well. Is brutality just a normal part of life, in terms of, like in the animal kingdom, like obviously they hunt each other, and then like wars and stuff, and different pandemics that we've had over the many years. Is it just a natural part of life? Or, but then as well, you can then say that human beings, we do have a conscience. So in terms of war and stuff, can that be reduced through the fact that we have a conscience?
Yeah.
Where,
Or is it part of ACEs?
yeah, yeah, like is the trauma, the cycle of trauma that's happening, is that the cause of all of the brutality. But then stuff like pandemics and stuff, that maybe is more going along the natural side of things.
Yeah. I think that'd be cool. Like in this podcast, it would be, we've got so many questions about this, and adverse childhood experiences. It comes down to the big question of how do we work as humans?
Yeah.
And we've got macro questions and micro questions, local things, global things, and there'll just be so many interesting conversations to have.
Definitely, I think that's a good point to like wrap up on as well.
Yeah.
So like have I think yourself, anyone that's listening, is brutality just a part of living in nature?
Thank you for listening, and join us next time for more ThriveCasters.
Don't forget to follow us on social media on @PointWM and #ThriveCasters. Join us next time for more conversations that matter to you.